Welcome back to another episode of Distorted Opinions. Today we have another wonderful guest. Michelle Sparrow is joining us, and we're going to be talking about a topic that many of us share a love for: video games. More specifically, we'll be discussing some of our favorite video game soundtracks. As someone who has a playlist of video game remixes on their iPod, this is a topic that I have been super excited about. So let's get right into it. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. And I think we're going to start with Matt, and then we'll work our way through. Matt, why don't you start with what your pick was for video game?
Woo! All right, this is going to be exciting. This is going to be fun for everyone and for our audience out there. This is not the only episode. We'll be having multiple episodes talking about video game music, whether pertaining to Nintendo, PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Sega, you know it. We're going to bring it to you. It's got to be right in your face, in your ears, and you're going to enjoy it. So anyways, this is going to be and obviously we have a great guest on, joining us for today, Michelle. So, so let's just jump right into it. I'm a big fan of survival horror games. Ever since really kind of crapping my pants, playing this specific genre, it still to this day, it's just one of those driving games that if I see it come out, if I see an advertisement come out, I'll try the demo and then I'll play it. But the game I'm going to be referencing is 1996, Sony PlayStation 1. Capcom came out with this game called Resident Evil. Yes, for those Resident Evil fans out there, we'll be enjoying this. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Specifically for this game, it was actually, it's a game that was inspired by actually a Nintendo game called Sweet Home, and it was only released in I almost said New Hampshire, Japan. Two different areas of the world. The game's referenced by Sweet Home, released in Japan, and it's a game that's based on this special police squad called STARS, Special Tactics and Rescue Squad. And basically, they run into this mansion that is corrupted by a virus, also known as the G virus, and it takes everything that's dead and pretty much brings it back to life with bioweapon creatures that go ahead and just rip your face off. So that's also including zombies as well. But the song that I'm going to be referencing is called "The Vacant Flat." All right, it was composed by, and I have in my notes here. I apologize for any pronunciations, but the composer is KOICHI HIROKI, and the song is, again, Vacant Flat. When you hear this song, it is incredibly unsettling that you may have to force yourself to put a light on if you are in a room by yourself in the dark with this theme song in the background. Very simple. It's almost like a psychological kind of like kid that's in a room by himself with a xylophone. And when you're hearing this song, you're probably going to, crap your pants, as I did back in the day when I first played this game. But this song is not only an inspiration to the series, but also create a pathway to other types of survival horror games that have also incredible music to it as well. Dino Crisis is also another game from Capcom that's got a Resident Evil themed reference to it, but obviously featuring dinosaurs. So
Shucks,
to make
really
a long story short, if you don't know what Dino Crisis is, it's Jurassic Park on steroids, pretty much, and blood and gore. Just not with Alan Grant or Jeff Goldblum. I know, I'm sorry, but hey, if Jeff Goldblum was in there, I would totally give it a platinum game. But yeah, that's pretty much what the game is. I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to take too much time. But yes, the Vacant Flat theme, look it up on YouTube. I dare you to shut the lights off and play this full blast. put a subwoofer on, and you might want to have a toilet paper roll with you just in case, and probably a nearby, bathroom, because like I told you, it's a very unsettling type of theme, but it just brings the game to light with a lot more color. So that's pretty much it, Resident Evil. So other than that, I'm going to go hand it off to our special guest, Michelle. Michelle, what do you have for our for your theme?
So I have a lot of notes, but one thing I will say to jump off of what you were talking about with Resident Evil is that I found a lot of the games where the soundtrack really mattered were horror games. Like currently I'm playing The Last of Us 2.
That's tough.
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to butcher this last name. I just Googled it again. Gustavo Santaolalla, I think is how you say it.
Short name for Gustavo.
Gustavo. But it's just this haunting like guitar melody, and it's just really a great soundtrack that just kind of, you can feel in the soundtrack when things are just going to go upside down. If you're not familiar with the game, it's basically like a virus took over. There's these spores, there's crazy mushroom monster people now, there's these zombie-esque characters, people are attacking you, and the music just sets it up for it to be pure.
Wow, that sounds pretty
chaos.
intense.
Yeah. So your Resident Evil points made me think of that.
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna have to try that game now.
PlayStation only.
Yeah, it's really
right
so.
now.
There's two of them. There's The Last of Us 1 and then The Last of Us Part 2. And Part 2 just came out, I think, a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So great game. PlayStation only.
Okay.
PlayStation 4. But one of the things that I was thinking about when I thought about this topic was the fact that video game music, like the soundtrack of our childhood, was pretty much like Mario music, Zelda music, Tetris, like all these old games. And I was thinking about how limited they were in terms of instruments.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, because they were focusing on really the 8-bit type of synthesizers, and then when Super Nintendo came out, they were brought into the 16-bit synthesizer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like all MIDIs. Where
Yes,
like
pretty
those
much. Yep, that's
songs.
exactly what it is.
Yet it somehow sounds cooler than MIDI, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So it's just like crazy to think like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, like was all on a MIDI keyboard, originally. But that music is still iconic despite all those limitations that they had. But another thing that's interesting about game music is it functions in two ways, right? You have cinematic cut scenes where it's like theater, where the music is building tension or adding emotions to the scene. But then you have music that's just there to be in the background while you're playing, while you're doing stuff. So when you have a game like Skyrim, which people are investing hundreds of hours into,
Yes, of course.
that background music is really important because you're going to be listening to that the whole time. So just having music that creates an atmosphere is.
And I will say that for the fact that you've played Skyrim for hundreds of hours, I still find you listening to the soundtrack just because, you can't get sick of it after listening for hundreds of hours. So it's definitely a good sign, that, there's consistency of, how enjoyable the music is, and obviously becomes a soundtrack for us, but at the same time, we can listen to it for hundreds of hours and never get sick of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that opening theme, like just the title credit, like the Viking music that they have, it's just unbelievable. But I wanted to, so I highlighted a few, sorry if I'm a little scrambled. I highlighted a few games where I really feel like the soundtrack really made the game. So I just talked about Skyrim, beautiful soundtrack, symphony, orchestra. Red Dead Redemption is another one that comes to mind.
Okay.
They do a nice job just setting the atmosphere with the music in that one. Another game that I'm recently gotten really into, and you might have heard of the Netflix series, but The Witcher.
Oh, yes. I heard that.
Yeah. So The Witcher was originally it was a book, a Polish book and book series, and now it's it turned into a video game, and then it turned into a show. But the video game has this amazing soundtrack. That's another game where it's like I could play that for 100 hours and still want to listen to the music, you know, outside of playing.
Now, is that
Yeah.
so I'm familiar with The Witcher 3, but is it, so are you referencing the whole series of the soundtrack, or is it just specifically to, because I know The Witcher 3 was really kind of commercialized. I didn't even realize there was a Witcher type of series until I started seeing commercials for Witcher 3, and I was like, well, wait a minute. What happened to Witcher 2 and Witcher? It's kind of like, you know, kind of going back to what you were talking about with Skyrim. If people don't know about Skyrim, it's an Elder Scrolls series. And before that, there was Oblivion. But even before that, they were really strictly just computer games, which some people may have not referenced.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. So there was a Witcher 1 and there's a Witcher 2. I'm thinking mostly of Witcher 3 right now because that's the one that I've spent the most time with. But yeah, the soundtrack is unbelievable. But it is funny because a lot of people, so I started off with playing Witcher 3 and then I didn't really, like I didn't start from the beginning and work my way. I started with the third one. So it is funny how one got more commercialized than the others. Metal Gear Solid.
Oh,
another game. With an amazing soundtrack. Just that sound, that alert, like that. So for those of you that don't know, it's a stealth game. So as soon as someone spots you, you get this, and then all of a sudden the music is like hard hitting, like symphony, like you gotta get out of there, like fast pace, like it's just unbelievable. The other thing I wanted to talk about too was there's a lot of games, and Ted can probably jump in on this, but where we started taking like already established musicians and putting them into video games. So you're looking at your Grand Theft Auto series that introduced the radio stations. And, you know, so you have Vice City where it's based in the 80s. So you have a lot of 80s rock, a lot of 80s music that just they add in there to add that like atmosphere. And then they continue to do that like with, I think it was 4, where you had an Eastern European man as the main character, and there were Eastern European stations in the game. So it's just kind of funny how they, you know, they changed the stations based on, you know, who was in it, who the main character was. Crazy Taxi, Offspring, that soundtrack, I think.
Yes,
oh,
please.
wow, that's a game I
so good.
forgot about.
I feel like they only had 3 Offspring songs, but still, when I played that game, I never like.
Yeah.
Like, come on over, let's have some fun with Crazy Taxi. Yeah. Like, so memorable. But yeah, so those were some of the top games I thought of when looking at this topic and kind of thinking about music and games in general. So.
Awesome.
That's amazing. Oh wow! Now you brought me down memory lane with saying Crazy Taxi. It was such an underrated game too, especially when it came out for the Dreamcast. It was such an underrated game. Like I remember like when getting the Dreamcast, you know, they really tried to commercialize Sonic Adventure and the House of the Dead 2, and then Crazy Taxi came out. Oh, and also Phantasy Star. But Crazy Taxi was just kind of like, hey, I'm out here. And people were like, yeah, okay, well, what's your point? Then Soul Calibur 2 came out. And they were like, oh, hey. And then Crazy Taxi still like, hey, I'm still here. So playing that game, yeah, Crazy Taxi is an amazing, amazing game. Again, guys, if whoever's listening, if you haven't played Crazy Taxi, jump on it. I believe it's actually even on
Probably on PSN.
Yeah, PSN and iOS too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
How
I think
play that on my
I'll
phone.
let's look it up right now.
I think there's
Well-
a PC port, but I don't know if I can recommend that. The controls are probably awful.
Well, we were talking about some of the video game. What just came to mind when you mentioned Crazy Taxi is Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Oh, there it is. Nice. Like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, like Goldfinger got put on the map, I feel like, because, I mean, if you were already a skater, which I wasn't, but then being exposed to like all those other songs and then like Superman by Goldfinger just like becomes a major hit, and it's nostalgic for me now because I played so many hours of, you know, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and
Here I am doing
right.
what
Like
I can,
it's super catchy. But you know, you think of those games, and the first thing you think of is the music that, like you had mentioned, Michelle, Vice City, because obviously it's 80s, and you just think of all the hits from the 80s that are obviously in that game, and it's almost synonymous with the game itself, which obviously is a sign of, you know, putting mainstream music in, or you know, music that's actually composed to enhance or just be one with that particular game. A couple of games one in particular, well, two. I'll add two here.
Add two.
Okay, The Sims.
Oh,
I was thinking about
The
Sims.
Sims is very basic,
Yes.
but when you hear it, it's almost like mall music. Like it's catchy, subtle, but you can listen to it over and over and over and over and over again, and not, you know, it's just background enough. But when you hear it, you're like, that's good. So obviously that's a super catchy. Another one similar to something that Michelle and Matt have referenced in terms of music that sets the landscape, or it creates, you know, the fear and emotion and the tone of how the gameplay is this War of Mine, which was a Steam game that came out in 2015, and it definitely, I feel like, hits the mark on a soundtrack that I would just listen to without needing the game, but it definitely enhances the gameplay. So if you don't know, this War of Mine is basically it's a wartime game, but it's in the perspective of civilians. So you're needing to survive and scavenge for food and whatnot, and either you help your neighbor or you don't, that type of thing. And you basically try to survive the war. In the game usually dictates somewhere in the 30 to 44 day mark, and it's challenging. But the music sets the tone. It's a combination of piano, synthesizer, and guitar. And it's just so subtle, works really well. But it also captures like hope and fear. So your characters that you're managing, you know, they're excited that good things happen, or, you know, something bad happens to one of the people in your house that you're, you know, part of your team. They die for lack of food or whatever. Like, you know, there's definitely the sadness that can be pushed through with the music at the same time. So, you know, the way it was orchestrated was actually really, really good.
is it kind of like a revamped version of Oregon Trail, just with better music?
It's more darker. Okay. It's much darker than Oregon Trail. I mean, the whole game is in grayscale. Like, it's very much.
It's Oregon Trail with hellfire.
Actually, kind of sounds like Death Road to Canada. Anyone ever played that one?
No.
Oh
No.
I never heard of that one.
Actually, it's probably much darker than Death Road to Canada. Death Road to Canada is kind of like a darker Oregon Trail.
Huh.
I may have to do it this weekend.
And then just another quick reference, you know, title track games, or a game that I'm watching streamers play on Twitch at the moment, Escape from Tarkov, is definitely has some really good music. supporting it. The title track song is super catchy. It's got some distortion guitar going on, so it's a bit rock in parts, but you know, that's more of a first-person shooter style game, survival with players and computer multiplayer. So that definitely stands out to me as another good example of a newer game that definitely has just good title track music. So when you're in the screens between rounds, you hear it, you're just getting pumped up because you're ready to go out and do it again, you know? So definitely another good game to reference there. But Kayla, what do you have on your list?
Oh boy. So I mentioned before we started the show that I'm the opposite with video games that I am with movies. So I haven't played a lot of modern video games. But as we were talking here, I'm glad, Ted, that you brought up The Sims, because I was actually thinking about that. And I don't know if you've played any of the newer versions of the game, but I think they actually have well-known artists recording songs for the game, like that would be playing on the radio in the background or whatever. But they do it in Simlish, so it's in the fake Sim language. So what do you got there? Sims living large.
Expansion.
Awesome. I don't know if that one is recent enough. I don't keep up with it, but I used to play it a ton, and I know I've seen on YouTube they actually have, if you search for it, they have videos. I think Lady Antebellum and maybe Lady Gaga have done songs for The Sims in Simlish, so they record it in this fake. Yeah, it's really bizarre.
Goldsnada, lots of gold.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a game that, as far as computer games comes to mind, and then I always think of as far as another computer game, Duke Nukem. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Megadeth did a cover of the Duke Nukem theme, which it's really, this week picking the song of the week was tough because there are so many I could pick. But if you haven't heard the Megadeth Duke Nukem cover, listen to it. But the game that I picked to talk about was 1993's, and there's a lot of argument about how you pronounce it. I pronounce it Secret of Mana, but I actually Googled it before we did the show to find out what the proper... Yeah, that's apparently what the consensus is.
Secret of Mana.
Secret of Mana.
Secret of Mana.
So Super Nintendo games have a lot of nostalgia for me, because my grandfather used to play Super Nintendo a lot when I would go up and visit my grandparents during the summer in Maine. And the games that I distinctly remember him playing were Super Mario World and Secret of Mana. And the Secret of Mana soundtrack, if you're not familiar with the game, is phenomenal. The entire game, all of the music is just fantastic, but it always makes me think of my grandfather when I hear it. And so one of the really cool songs from that is Secret of the Arid Sands, which you hear during the desert portion of the game. It's really cool. It's got xylophone. There's a website that I discovered. I don't even remember how I discovered it. It's called OC Remix, and all it is people's remixes and covers of video game songs from pretty much any video game you can imagine. There is an entire section of the site that is just songs that people have done based off of the Secret of Mana soundtrack. And there's just some really, really cool stuff there. But there are a lot of really cool covers of Secret of the Arid Sands. And I like that, you'll find everything from people doing heavy metal hard rock covers of a song to kind of more techno-based stuff. And then there's stuff that's kind of funky in there too. But they've also got songs from Mario Brothers, songs from Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a whole other, Sonic had some really... That's music. When you hear Sonic the Hedgehog, do you not think of the songs that you hear during that game? But Secret of Mana just had so many good songs that really, again, like a lot of other games, set the tone for different scenes throughout the game. The boss theme is another really cool song there. That, again, there's some awesome heavy metal covers. And if there's enough interest from people... a lot of the stuff is on Spotify, so I could kind of curate a Spotify video game playlist if people wanted to be able to.
That's a good idea.
Play some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that I'm gonna just stick to Secret of Mana, because if I start talking about other games, then I could go on and on and on. But that's an excellent game, and to this day, I actually got, what do they call it? The little Super Nintendo. They came out with the
the Super NES, the SNES Mini.
Yeah, is that what it is? I actually have it. It's right here in front of me. And the thing that I was most excited about in getting that was being able to play Secret of Mana, because I watched my grandfather playing that when I was a kid, and I don't know many older folks. I was telling Ted a while back that my grandfather was in his 80s and he was playing World of Warcraft and building up characters and selling them on eBay. The man had
brilliant.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
He was so into video games. I remember watching him play a lot of computer games too. Oh goodness, the game that I was thinking of it when Michelle was talking about her games, and now it just went right out the window. And it's going to come back to me when we're done the show. I know it is. But I watched him play a lot of video games on the computer as well, and he had a 5.1 surround sound system on his computer, so when he would play his video games, you could hear the subwoofer booming throughout the house. Like, they live in the hills in Maine, and their neighbors are a good distance away, but I'm pretty sure they could hear him playing his video games when he would play. I mean, the house would shake. And then he would play his polka music later, and that would make the whole house shake, and the dogs would go nuts.
Also in the 5.1?
Yeah. Well,
oh yeah, good.
Yeah, well,
music in 5.1. Can't go wrong.
At least with the subwoofer going, which that papa music has some real heavy bass when you've got a subwoofer.
5 times the Weird Al Yankovic.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, Super Nintendo games in particular, I have fond memories of. Grand Theft Auto, you mentioned, another game that I think I largely got into because of the soundtrack of the game. And I actually heard a lot of songs from the 80s that I wasn't otherwise familiar with until I started playing that game. There was Anthrax in there. I think there was Megadeth in there. Flock of Seagulls. Journey, I think, had a song. So I mean, they had
they did
a lot of mainstream artists, and then there was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which kind of moved, I think, into the 90s, and you had more of that kind of music, but from the 90s era. So yeah, I think I'm going to keep it to those because, like Matt said at the beginning, video games is easily going to be multiple shows because they're just...
Like, we didn't talk about Guitar Hero.
Oh, God.
We didn't talk about Rock Band. We didn't talk about... Like I'm saying, like we're just scratching the surface on what this
I had it on my list, but like rhythm games in general, like that's a whole genre.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. There's one right there. I've got one in the closet here too.
I got the Wii controller here.
And I think I have my Wii. I think I have my Wii Les Paul under my bed. But some trivia. Kayla, did you know that Secret of Mana is actually a sequel and a spin-off off of Final Fantasy Adventure?
I had heard something about that, but I haven't really looked into it too much. I know there's
DJ Hero. DJ Hero. That's
wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, no, there's also there's another sequel to that, I believe, and I am gonna butcher the name of it. Seiken Densu 3.
Yeah, Seiken. Yeah, so Seiken Densu is Seiken Densu, also known as Final Fantasy Gaiden. I'm looking it up right now. Is actually the first game that was released in Japan. And then Seiken Densu 2 was also known as Secret of Mana.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I have not played any of the Final Fantasy games, but I feel like
Well, if you played Secret of Mana, you'll enjoy this Final Fantasy game.
I bet I would. Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII.
Oh,
Graphics blew my mind away when that game came out. I'm like, there's no way it's going to get any better than this.
and also,
and now you look back at it and you're like, they were so blocky.
Right.
if I could think of just 2 Final Fantasy games that just have incredible soundtracks, is Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IV and whatnot. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many good games we could talk. I didn't even talk about Legend of Zelda, which is another one with some really...
Another great
There's
one.
too many legends.
Yeah.
Relax.
Not of Zelda, but of like legendary
A Link
games
to
to
the
reference.
Past is the one I'm thinking of, but yes, they did have a lot of other. Then they had versions for the Game Boy system and everything, and yeah, so there's so many. But alrighty, so I'm gonna wrap my picks for games there. Now might be a good time to go into our song of the week.
Of course. Well,
Sure.
how about we go backwards now? So, Kayla, why don't you tell us what your song of the week is?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I discovered this website, OC Remix, and they have a lot of really great covers and remixes of songs. So I picked, it was a hard choice because there's so many good tracks over there, but I picked a track called Into the Funk of It, which is from 1993, Secret of Mana. It was arranged by, again, I'm probably going to butcher the name, but a guy by the name of Tetramino. So I stumbled across the track while I was listening to a bunch of songs from the game on OC Remix, and I was trying to pick which one I was going to pick for my song of the week. This one has some really funky bass lines, some groovy piano, some really cool electric violin. I mentioned that one of the things that I'm kind of drawn to is the heavy metal with the distorted guitar covers, but there's a lot of other really cool stuff with really interesting instrumentation. This one has some electric violin, which is awesome. And for those not aware, Ted just got a cello, so perhaps we need to plan on some maybe video game covers or something for a future jam session.
I'm still learning. I've only had the thing for like 2 weeks, so I've got a long way to go.
That's over there, hot cross buns.
Don't worry.
One step at a time.
Eventually you'll get
better.
there. You'll get there. Practice
get
makes
there.
perfect. Practice makes
That's right.
perfect.
Definitely not an easy instrument.
No, not at all. I tried to play violin and it didn't go well at all. I learned that it was a lot harder than playing guitar. I thought because I knew how to play guitar, playing violin would be easy. No, it sounded like fingernails on a friggin' chalkboard. It was awful. But anyway, I digress. So as I mentioned, I used to go to my grandparents and watch my grandfather play this game during the summers, and he'd build up his characters in World of Warcraft, and he was just a big gamer. So I loved the original chip tunes from the game, but some of the remixes on OC Remix are fantastic, and they just bring the songs to a whole new level. And as a guitarist and a fan of heavy metal, the ones that have the really heavy guitar are some of the, some of my favorites, but some of those remixes that are outside of the norm of what I typically listen to are fantastic. And Desert Snowstorm is one of those tracks. Dragon Song is another. There's another one on there called Dueling Consoles, Step Off My Flower Bed. I mean, I could go on and on and on. All of the songs from the game are good, and then there's amazing covers of them and remixes. So my suggestion would be to just go check out any song on OC Remix from Secret of Mana. You won't be disappointed. There's a lot of really cool stuff there. And like I said, they have other games too. So I think there's a ton of Final Fantasy stuff on there. Mario Brothers, a lot of more recent games. So that's my pick, Into the Funk of It, the remix by Tetramino. And I think next up would be Ted.
Yeah, sure. So my song of the week, this particular song as the resident heavy metal recommendation that I typically have every week is no exception. From the 2016 Doom game. The song is called BFG Division. It was composed or created by Mick Gordon, who is from Australia. And the guy is currently 35 years old. When the game came out in 2016, so the fact that he's already put together basically a good portion of the soundtrack for this game, being 31 years old is, I'm jealous. But either way, BFG Division, there's a YouTube video of him playing it. He plays it with an 8-string guitar because it is metal and it's really low. It's just super catchy. I find myself just finding that song and just letting it play in the background while I'm doing stuff. It's got a good groove to it, and it's just it's metal. It's great. Definitely right up my alley for how I enjoy my music, and that song in particular from that game is one that really stands out as like it's a nice metal song.
Doom has had a history of having a lot of heavy metal themed theme songs in every level. I can't really even think of one Doom level in all throughout the series is that is anything more than a fast-paced type of theme song.
Right. No, and I think you're right. Majority, for the 2016 game, I didn't even go back to the 1993 version, but for the newer version that just came out, I've listened to a few tracks, but BFG Division is the track that I just get stuck on and just hit repeat because it's really good. So definitely my pick for this week.
I like
awesome.
It.
All right. No pressure. Michelle, what's your pick?
So my pick, we should all know the soundtrack to Castlevania.
Oh, which one?
All right, so Video Games Live is a group that basically takes orchestras, does orchestrated versions of video game music. Well, they did Castlevania, and on top of that, it's Castlevania Rock, because they bring out a guitarist and they bring out, so it's the symphony, but then all of a sudden it's like this awesome guitar solo, and like, it's just really good. We saw it, the first time I saw it, it was live. We went to Video Games Live. Tommy Tallarico, the director of Video Games Live, also plays guitar. So he came out on stage with a really awesome Castlevania themed guitar and played the guitar over it, and it was just absolutely.
That was a really good show.
Really good show.
That we went to Video Games Live twice, but that Castlevania version was outstanding. It was put together like they wound up selling CDs, and I believe that
so you can
track was recorded.
Yep, you can download. So if you you can download it off of like Apple Music, Spotify, but Video Games Live, Castlevania Rock, it's just so good. And they have the live version of it too. And I think the guitar he played on, it was given away after.
Wow.
It was like part of a giveaway. So on top of that, like it was just epic. But yeah.
I think I found something to put on my Spotify list now.
Yep.
I know.
Yep.
We're going to have to add it to our Spotify list.
Check it out. But very high energy, great, and seeing it live was unbelievable. So
awesome.
That's my song.
Good pick.
Perfect.
All right, Matt, I think that leaves you.
Yeah, so
final pick.
This flood of memories. Secret of Mana, Doom, Crazy Taxi, Skyrim. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. My song of the week. Going back to Resident Evil. I know I gave you the horror part, but now I'm going to give you the robe and the cashmere vanilla scented candle part of Resident Evil. The song is the Save Room theme from Resident Evil 1, composed by Masami Ueda. When listening to the song, it's just very compelling, it's very elegant, and it's soft. It almost gives you a sense of breathing room because again, when you're playing Resident Evil, again, it's all about survival horror. You're limited to ammo. You have all these monsters coming at you, zombies coming at you. And when you finally get to a save room, it's like your only safe point throughout the whole mansion. Okay, that no one will attack you. There's probably some items in there in the chest. You know, in order to save the game, you have to use a typewriter. But when listening to the theme song, it's just kind of like a sense of, okay, let's kind of recalibrate our thoughts. How can we go ahead and try to beat the hell out of this game? How do we go ahead and survive? But it's the Resident Evil 1 save room theme. That's exactly what it's called. Composed by Masami Ueda. And other than that, yeah, so after you change your underpants from, you know, listening to the Vacant flat theme, go to the themes, the save theme song, and put that cashmere vanilla scented candle on it. I can't even say vanilla. A cashmere vanilla scented candle. Don't ask why. I just Googled it. Anyways, so guys, I think that concludes for today's episode. Audience, tell us what your favorite video game theme song is, whether it's on our social media or even leave us a message. Again, we have a voicemail. If you want to leave us a message, we will reply back to you. Other than that, that's pretty much what I have to say. Do you guys have any final words?
I just remembered what the game was that I was trying to think of.
Hey.
So I don't think it had a ton of music because it was a really, really old game, but King's Quest, there was a whole series. It was a role-play game, and you had to type in and be like, pick up the stick, and then the character would walk over and pick up the stick, or open the door. And I remember watching my grandfather play all of those games. Again, not really necessarily the music that comes to mind, but I just remember he played that series, and I remember watching him play that. I mean, for hours on end, I would go sit with him in his office and just watch him play games. And so that's what the game was. It was King's Quest. That's all I had.
I like it.
That's all I had for this show. We'll have probably a future show on music at some point. But
I now have the Castlevania theme song stuck in my head, specifically "Bloody Tears." Do-do-do-do.
That's the one I was talking about.
Oh wait, is that bloody? Is that
or is it
Bloody Tears, or is that the?
It's the main theme, whatever the like.
Yes, from the first one, right?
Yeah, it's that song, but it's got a guitar.
Oh,
we don't need
It's
a
happening
Spotify
today.
playlist because Matt can
Yeah,
just
we'll just
do
sing
all the
along.
I'll
songs.
sing all of the songs. Your audience might shrink, but
well, Michelle, it's a pleasure having you on our show. Hope to see you come back more on multiple more episodes talking about video game music or even just music in general. Because again, we are Distorted Opinions, where it's all about music and nothing about politics.
That's right. Thank
Thanks
you
for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Thanks.
Thank you everybody for watching. Again, anchor.fm/distorted opinions. You can find a list of all of the platforms that we're on, and that's where you can leave us a message. And hopefully we'll see you as a part of a future segment on the show. Leave us a message. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.